Welcome to the 2020 New York State Assembly Democratic Primary Candidates Forum. My name is Alice Pernick, and I am co-president of the League of Women Voters of Larchmont, Mamaroneck. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan and neither supports nor opposes any of the candidates. The candidates forums we organize provide vital information to the voting public. We're a small group of volunteers that accomplishes a great deal, including keeping you informed via our lwvlm.org website, our Facebook page, and email informational blasts. We would love for you to become a member. Please join us. In addition to this candidates forum, we have a number of virtual events for other upcoming races. Our candidates forum for the Mamaroneck School Board race may be viewed on demand on our website, lwvlw.org, or on the website of LMC Media, which is lmcmedia.org. That race will be decided by absentee ballot only, and ballots must be received by the school district by June 9th. So be sure to mail it as soon as possible, or stop by Mamaroneck High School on June 9th from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. and drop your ballot in the drop box outside the main office. Turning our attention to the June 23rd primaries, if you would like to view the League's forum for the Democratic primary for Westchester County District Attorney, please go to the County League of Women Voters website, lwvw.org, or our local league website, lwvlm.org. There will also be a league forum for the Democratic primary in the Congressional District 16 race. That district includes Larchmont, Mamaroneck, New Rochelle, Rye City, part of Rye Town, and more. It will be recorded on June 7th, and the public may pre-register for the live forum and may submit questions until June 5th. For more information on how to pre-register or submit questions, go to the website of the County League of Women Voters of Westchester, lwvw.org. And to view this forum after June 7th, replays will be accessible on lwvw.org and other local league websites, including ours, lwvlm.org. Additionally, this program will be aired by local cable access stations, including LMC Media, and made available on their website, lmcmedia.org. Now, I'd like to give you some information about how to vote, because there is a lot of confusion and misinformation out there. This year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, all voters can choose to vote either in person or by absentee ballot. Voting by absentee ballot is a two-step process. The Board of Elections first will mail an application for an absentee ballot to all registered voters. If you wish to vote by absentee ballot because of the pandemic, the first step is to check the box that says temporary illness and return the application, which must be received, not just postmarked, actually received by the Board of Elections by June 16th. If you have previously applied for an absentee ballot, you don't have to request it again. You will then receive an absentee ballot for county, state, and congressional primaries, and a separate ballot for the presidential primary, depending on your party affiliation. The second step is to fill out these ballots and postmark them by June 22nd. If you prefer to vote in person, polling sites will be open. Early voting will take place from June 13th to 21st, although polling sites and hours have not been determined yet. In-person voting will take place on June 23rd, Election Day, from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., although again, polling sites have not yet been determined. For updates on this information, continue to check our website. If all of this seems like too much information to remember, you will find it on our website, lwvlm.org, or you can go to the League of Women Voters vote411.org website. You fill in your address and you find out information about your registration, races, candidates, and ballots. And again, that website is vote411.org. It's like one-stop shopping. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the candidates for appearing this evening. I also want to thank LMC Media for their assistance with this forum, and the New Rochelle and Rybrook, and Portchester Leagues, who have co-sponsored this evening. Our timekeeper tonight will be Rosalind Carver of the Rybrook, and Portchester League, and our program's moderator is Nicole Benjamin. Ms. Benjamin is a League of Women Voters member of League of Women Voters of River Towns. Her passion for serving her community has led her to participate in numerous civic organizations. A resident of Yonkers, she currently works as a program evaluator for the County of Westchester. We thank her for moderating this forum, and now I will turn the forum over to Ms. Benjamin.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Nicole Benjamin, and it is my pleasure to serve as your moderator tonight. The League of Women Voters owns this forum, and only those permitted by the League may record, and even those must air the forum in its entirety, because the FCC requires that a debate must not be edited and must be broadcast in its entirety, either live or reasonably soon after it takes place. Unauthorized videos are not permitted. The format of this debate includes the following. Each candidate for office may make a 2-minute opening statement. The order of speaking has already been determined by lot. The moderator reads all questions. Candidates have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. Each candidate may make a 2-minute closing statement. The order of speaking will be the same as the order of the opening statement. The moderator is in charge of the debate. Questions will address issues, not personalities. The order of speaking was determined by a coin toss. Candidates have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. There will be no rebuttal this evening. Candidates may include rebuttal commentary in their closing statements. We have determined the opening statements to be in the order of Ms. Cameron, then Assemblyman Otis. You may begin.
Thank you. I'm Meg Cameron, and I'm running for New York State Assembly. Thank you so much to the League, LMC Media, and everybody tuning in. The work facing us as a state is incredibly urgent. It has become clear to all that many Black Americans live in fear for their lives every day. The massive peaceful demonstrations and the way those demonstrations have been hijacked by looting, arson, and violence show the breadth and depth of people's disaffection. We're still dealing with COVID-19 and may see a spike in the next couple of weeks. The quarantine was necessary, but has had serious economic fallout. And staying at home has presented children and their families with huge challenges. Right now, we need an assembly member who's in Albany for us, who has a passion for human rights, civil liberties, and social justice, who has real-world business experience and can advocate for our local businesses and their workers, and who has a deep concern for children and families. It wouldn't hurt if this person also had a degree in immunology. Well, that person is me. I grew up in Brooklyn in a family where money was scarce, but I've lived in the district for 35 years, and today I'm a successful small business owner. With my husband and son, I own SCG Cars, New York State's only car manufacturer. Based in Westchester, we make exotic sports and race cars. I'm also chair of the Tri-City Democratic Committee. And in my 6 years of leadership, I brought new life to the committee and led us to election victories that have given us a good, strong, Democratic-controlled local government for the first time in ages. I'm a community volunteer, a mother, and a grandmother of 5. I raised my kids in the district and sent them to local public schools. And I understand how tough the quarantine has been on families, and I'm running to help. I hope you'll vote for me so I can be your voice and your fierce advocate.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Assemblyman Otis?
Hi there. Good evening, and thank you to LMC Media and the League of Women Voters. It's great to be with you tonight. I'm Steve Otis. I am running for re-election for the Assembly to continue the work that I've been doing for the last few years. By every measure that you would judge a state legislator, I have been successful. That is on statewide issues, being a leader on a number of key issues, on bringing local results to every community that I represent, being very involved, deeply involved in all the communities, being everywhere, and being very effective in Albany in passing legislation and moving budget issues. I'm one of the probably the only legislators that year after year passes over half of the bills I've introduced. In 2019, I actually passed 13 of my 14 prime sponsored bills. That is unheard of. My biggest achievement in the Assembly, among many, but is a clean water program that I started in 2015 that has given grants just short of $1.2 billion statewide in the first 5 years, $45.5 million to Westchester communities. A great success. I came up with the idea. I brought the governor and the both houses of the legislature along, but I chose public service as a career many years ago. For many years, I was a counsel and chief of staff to Susie Oppenheimer, then elected to office in Rye, and now in the state assembly. I believe not just being in public service, but using it to get things done, to be effective, to get results. And that's what my record demonstrates. We'll be talking about other issues tonight, but for me to do it and not be effective, it is difficult to be effective. Not everyone in the legislature is. I am, by every measure. I want to continue that work and deliver results for all the communities I represent.
Thank you, Assemblyman Otis. We will begin with you, Assemblyman, for our first question. First lead question, what in New York's criminal justice system is most in need of reform?
Well, we've had key reforms the last few years that I was very much a part of on bail reform, raise the age, speedy trial, key reforms that are now in place and have improved the criminal justice system. But the shocking events of the last week are actually not that shocking, because we saw a murder of an individual, but over the last decades, and even as recently as 2016, where we heard Eric Gardner's last words, I cannot breathe, I can't breathe. We should have learned something. And the real crisis today is that the world hasn't woken up to the fact that we live in a society where racism permeates so much of what goes on. We need better training for police. We need better quality control in terms of protocols. But the outrage is real, and we are going to be meeting next week, the Assembly, to pass additional legislation to deal with some of the issues that are front and center right now. We had a 4-hour conference on Monday. Deep changes that I am very much in support of. So there's work to be done, but it's not just in the criminal justice system. It relates to the unequal situation in housing and education, in so many other things that permeate our society. I'm there to do that job.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Ms. Cameron? It's muted. Unmute yourself, Ms. Cameron.
Oops. Sorry about that. I actually agree, excuse me, with everything my opponent said. And I would go further and say that the package of bills suggested by the New York State Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus looks like a great package, and I expect that the legislature will pass many or most of them, and that should help. Now, the reason I'm running, the difference between me and my opponent is not policy differences on things like that. It's what we would do about them. So my opponent, I understand he co-signed or he is co-sponsoring the repeal of 50A, and thank you for that, Assemblyman Otis. But I would go further than he has ever done. I would actually sponsor important bills. So in his 4 terms in office, he has never once written a bill about criminal justice reform or voting reform or reproductive rights or any of the things he'll talk about. He will vote for them. He will co-sponsor if many or most Assembly Democrats sign on to them, but he has never once stuck his neck out to write a bill. This stuff is important to me. I would do whatever is necessary, including writing big, important bills. That's it.
Next question. Ms. Cameron, how has the pandemic impacted your legislative priorities?
Oh, that is a great question. So I had a whole platform, and that platform is still there, but there's another platform on top of it. So, you know, continuing to enact gun control laws is still important, but making sure that we recover from the coronavirus crisis financially has become the first order of business, because we know that gun violence increases in times of distress, in times of economic strife. So, you know, I mean, we have to make people's lives okay at the same time we take guns away from bad guys. You know, it's important that we recover economically, and it's also important that the school steps in. I mean, the state steps in and helps with education should children be home again in the fall. And there's a lot the state can and should do. So the first thing they have to do is make sure every child who's expected to learn at home has a computer or a tablet and internet service. And boy, that's tricky because my internet doesn't always work. And a nutritious lunch. We have to make sure that little kids aren't asked to have excessive screen time, which we know is bad for them. We're going to have to do something for working parents, whether it is, oops, I have a lot more to say, but I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Assemblyman Otis, how has the pandemic impacted your legislative priorities?
Well, I would first tell you that since the beginning of March, 99% of what I and my staff have been doing has been helping individuals, small businesses, not-for-profits, school districts, local governments deal with the infinite number of problems that have come up because of COVID-19. And it has been difficult work, but it's been rewarding work. When it comes to small business, I'm on the phone with small business people who are often in tears at fear that their business with no backstop may go under because of the crisis, and we're trying to help them, and we're getting results. In terms of legislative package, I actually introduced a bill in March to provide loans to small businesses and to not-for-profits affected by the pandemic. And that concept was picked up by the governor and announced a few weeks ago. The governor has, through executive order, established just such a program with $100 million for small businesses who really could not get the money out of the federal program and not-for-profits who are at a real risk. When it comes to the COVID crisis, we have a real economic crisis here that is going to affect the economic viability of all institutions, of businesses, of governmental entities, of school districts. And so with my knowledge of government, I want to be involved going forward in what we're going to do to keep the fabric of our society together. I just say on criminal justice, I passed very important legislation on missing persons, one of the first in the nation on this, and also Lulu and Leo's law responding to a murder, horrible murder of 2 children in Manhattan.
Okay. Next question, Assemblyman Otis. With the recent disruption to our education system, what role can New York State play from a regulatory or budgetary standpoint to address the evolving changes to deliver quality education?
I'm on the education committee and I speak to superintendents on a regular basis, and especially during this crisis, and also speak to Fran Wills, our new member of the Board of Regents. We have a real crisis coming into the fall because school districts really don't know what they're going to be doing. Is it still going to be remote? Is it going to be partially remote, partially at home? We're certainly going to have to recast what's going on in the classroom, how many kids you can have in a classroom at a time, where cafeteria is going to be. The Board of Regents has established a committee to look at many of these issues. I've undertaken my own research, looking to see what some other countries have done. And the governor has appointed a task force to look at these issues. But this is a very difficult terrain. Teachers worked very hard the last few months to do remote learning. It's a lot more labor intensive, not just for the parents who are there assisting their kids, but for the teachers. And we are in a state of flux. So I'm going to be involved in this. I speak to the experts up in Albany on a regular basis and have every intention of staying fully engaged, as I do, with parents, teachers, school superintendents, school board members, to make sure that we deal with things in a way that are responsive to the needs of our districts. During the crisis, a number of things came up for school districts that I was able to be helpful as different crises came up. And we do have some issues. We have an issue right now with the school vote June 9th, and many of the ballots have not gone out yet. We're going to have to remedy that and extend the time, I think, and we're working on that with the governor's office.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron.
Okay, it's not enough to just acknowledge how tough it has been for teachers who were trained to do classroom teaching and now have to reinvent themselves and their curriculum. The state can do something about this. They could help teachers with distance learning by creating over the summer an online friendly curricula and lesson plans that they could make available to school districts and teachers on an entirely optional basis. But you could get all the teachers of the year, all the early childhood educators together and make a really good online curriculum that would save each individual teacher from having to reinvent the wheel, in a medium that he or she has not been trained to teach through. Another thing that can be done is early childhood education experts have to figure out approaches to home learning for little kids that don't involve excessive screen time, which we know is bad for little children's developing brains. We cannot experiment with a generation of children's brains. And if kids are going to be home in the fall, we have to help working parents, either with childcare in the form of vouchers, tax credits, or safe daycare options, or if the medical situation doesn't allow this, by encouraging both schools and businesses to offer flexible schedules.
Thank you. Ms. Cameron, Governor Cuomo has cited a significant shortfall in the New York State budget going forward. What changes do you recommend to increase revenue and or reduce spending?
So that is another fantastic question. I would support Shelley Mayer's bill to raise taxes modestly on people earning over $5 million a year. And that money would go to public schools and public universities. And I think that's a great way to, to help finance public education. I know that a while back, the governor encouraged counties to share services, and nobody really wanted to do it. But this time, such encouragement maybe could be attached to aid so that each county could really, work more efficiently and for less money, and that could help. And do I have more time?
It's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Assemblyman Otis, same question. Would you like it repeated?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Governor Cuomo has cited a significant shortfall in the New York State budget going forward. What changes do you recommend to increase revenue and or reduce spending?
Well, the first step that we need here is we need Congress, both houses of Congress, to come through with the aid package that all 50 states need during this pandemic. This is the time. We are in a period of time, as we were in the Great Depression, where the federal government is the only one that can be the financial backstop for states. And so the first agenda for the governor and the first agenda for both houses of the legislature is to see that package come through. I am in support of raising revenues, and there are a variety of proposals that are out there, but none of those proposals are going to provide money this year in the next few months to prevent cuts to healthcare, school districts, and local governments. We need the federal aid, and that is why the governor continues to press for that. What can be happens beyond that? The state is going to have to be helpful as we can, but the state is really out of money. The state actually, with the delay in the filing of income taxes till July 15th, we're actually doing some short-term borrowing to have things go forward. We need the federal money. There are a variety of proposals in addition to Senator Mayer's proposal that are out there and will be in the mix. We're going to have to come up with some additional revenues as well. In terms of shared services, there are a lot of shared services that go on in Westchester County already. The crisis of the time economically is not going to be solved through increased shared services.
Thank you. Assemblyman Otis, what would you do to help restore small businesses that were required to close because of the pandemic?
Well, you know, the first, this is something I'm dealing with every day. I was on the phone with helping a jewelry store owner in New Rochelle because the rules said he can only do curbside. And he said, a jewelry store, you can't safely do curbside. I was on the phone trying to help and get some change, and we got changes in the governor's guidelines based upon those conversations. In Larchmont, a landscape architect was saying we need to do some plantings, even at a socially distant way, a safe way, before the planting season up, or else nurseries are going to lose a lot of money. Landscape architects are going to lose clients, and contractors are going to lose clients. I'm dealing with a business right now that we're trying to get open and dealing with economic development to do that. But there's a bigger picture, and that is the crisis that this whole country faces, which is the economics of everything have now changed, and there's going to be a recalibration that we are at great risk of losing businesses, losing not-for-profits, and we're going to have to find ways to keep everybody on track. And I've been doing that with small businesses. I'd say 2 small business pieces of legislation that I have passed last year. The most significant small business legislation is to restore the right of small businesses, commercial tenants, to a day in court before they could be evicted and their lease terminated midterm. I wrote that legislation and I got it passed. A few years ago, I passed legislation for small businesses, business improvement districts, so they would get more information on how their money, their assessment was being spent. Thank you very much. Small business is great, and that's why I've done those things.
Thank you. Ms. Cameron, you're on mute. What would you do to help restore small businesses that were required to close because of the pandemic?
So as a small business owner, I think it's a complicated problem, but a simple answer, and that is money, money, money. Small businesses just need loans, and they need to be able to delay paying, making various payments until, as do individuals, till everybody's back on their feet. And I agree with the Assemblyman that the federal government absolutely must keep us afloat. I mean, it's that simple.
Okay. All right. Next question. Ms. Cameron, New York's infrastructure is in trouble. What 2 infrastructure projects do you view as priorities and why?
Ooh. I know there are a bunch on the table. Honestly, I don't know the answer to this, But I think that we also need something that isn't, I think we need to also start doing more infrastructure for clean, green energy. So I know that New York State passed a sweeping climate and community protection bill, which is wonderful, but we have to make it a reality by making clean, green energy available. And I would love to see more projects doing that. So NYSERDA says that we have to make, if we're going to meet, New York's going to meet the target for 2030, it needs to make sure there's more solar energy available. So I would love to see New York invest in that.
Assemblyman Otis?
Thank you. Well, I mentioned earlier the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act of 2015, which is really thanks to the great support of Governor Cuomo, a huge success. And here in Westchester, around the state, 690 projects so far, 67,000 new jobs statewide, $2.5 billion in savings to property taxpayers. We do need to do the same thing when it comes to climate change. And I am on the Assembly's Climate Change Task Force and on the Assembly's Environmental Conservation Committee. And there is a great retooling that has to happen in the world of energy generation and energy distribution if we are going to meet those targets. So this is something that my challenger and I agree on. But there are great infrastructure needs in mass transit, great infrastructure needs on our roads and bridges. And again, like the Great Depression, infrastructure is going to be an additional area where we are going to have to bolster the economy by creating jobs. And a lot of times those are construction jobs. And we've seen that with the water program, and we will see it in these other areas. But I'm a big infrastructure guy. When I was a mayor, we fixed a lot of things. It's a good thing. We fixed our firehouses, we fixed our roads, and we all have to keep our house in order. It's going to be a little tougher with the tight economy we're going to be in.
Thank you, Assemblyman Otis. This is the only public question submitted to the League by the deadline of June 1st. The question was submitted by constituent Louise Perez. Assemblyman Otis, since we have early voting in New York State, would you support changing the current requirement that election poll workers have to work the entire day from 5:30 to 9:30 p.m.?
Well, that is an interesting question. And, I sympathize with the poll workers that have been doing that. That is done. That's an old rule that is done partially so that people would know that the people that coming in aren't coming in twice. But that is something that probably is worth looking at. But the bigger change is, I'm a co-sponsor of the bill of the constitutional amendment to allow mail-in voting as a right permanently. We're doing it now for this primary by executive order because of the pandemic. That right may be extended in November through executive order if the pandemic requires it. But to change it in law so that everyone can vote by mail as of right, it requires a change in the state constitution, eventually a referendum in 2021. And I support that election reform and many others. But the poll workers, they are survivors of a long, long day, and they don't just get there at 6, they get there at 5:30. They don't leave at 9, they leave at 9:30 or later. So long day.
Ms. Cameron? You're muted.
Sorry about that. So I would absolutely support that because it's very hard for boards of elections to find poll workers. They're always desperate. Number one. Number two, the people who work the polls are usually senior citizens. And now with COVID-19, they're the people most vulnerable. And it would be nice to do something to make the job more attractive to younger, less vulnerable people who might not have a whole day. So for both those reasons, and I think as my opponent said, People are so tired at the end of the day, that probably counteracts any, eyes on the whole thing, benefit you might get because they're exhausted. Yeah,
Ms. Cameron,
yes.
what are the next steps that should be taken to improve the water quality of the Long Island Sound?
That is a great question. And I know that we need sewer upgrades in the municipalities, and the municipalities are struggling to pay for it. I'm not sure why municipalities are supposed to pay for their own sewer lines. But those lines are overloaded. They have infiltration. We need to upgrade our sewer system, and I'm not sure why the state doesn't kick in and do this, take it over, but we'd probably have a cleaner sound if they did.
Assemblyman Otis?
Well, again, this is the program that I created. It was the case previously that the state didn't pay towards these costs. They do now. And the reason why I came up with the program is understanding that many communities had water projects that they needed to do, sometimes even under court order to do, but could not afford to do. Property taxpayers couldn't afford to pay them. And so we changed the math by coming up with the grant program. The math now is that they get a grant for part of it, they borrow a loan, sometimes at no interest from the state for the other part, and suddenly what we found when we created the program is communities that never were doing water projects, never went to the state for the loan program, now are getting the grants, they come in for the loans because the work needs to be done. And it is, what should be done next is more communities have to do the engineering to apply for more grants because the pipeline doesn't end with the 1.2 billion that's been spent already. This is a program that's going to go on at least to 2024 and probably go on forever beyond the time of any of us. It's been such a success. The program that I started, the legislation that I wrote, is now really a permanent part of the infrastructure spending of state government. It exceeds the Environmental Bond Act. For the first time last year, we spent $300 million for the state's Environmental Bond Act. Last year, the program I helped create gave out $416 million in grants. Every community on the Sound Shore that I represent has gotten grant money from that program.
Okay, thank you. Assemblyman Otis, what can be done to make our nursing homes safer?
Well, this is a very good question. And in talking to nursing homes and talking to family members of folks in nursing homes during the pandemic, there are a lot of stresses. The reality for nursing homes is there were economic stresses even before this crisis. And so we're going to have to look at the reimbursement rates that come from the federal government and the state government, because if not, we're going to lose some nursing homes. We're not going to have the nursing home beds we need in this state to meet the demand. This is a real crisis. And now with the pandemic, there are going to be heightened standards, as there should be, heightened requirements, heightened reporting. And in fact, one of the bills that we passed last week is a bill to study this whole area in terms of heightened requirements for nursing homes and assisted living facilities. But this is, as I spoke about the economic crisis facing all sectors because of the COVID-19 crisis, this is clearly one of them. For nursing homes, for hospitals, for every kind of group that's out there, we're going to have to figure out a way to make sure these institutions that we need can survive economically. It's going to be some hard work. It takes experienced people in government to know how to make all of this come together and get us through this crisis.
Ms. Cameron?
I agree with much of what my opponent said, but in addition, there have been budget cuts that make it harder for seniors to stay at home. And even though this doesn't seem like a time to restore, to reverse budget cuts, keeping people at home actually would save the state money and make nursing homes less crowded. So that's another thing we can do to, to decrease the pressure on nursing homes.
Okay. Miss, what did that order? Okay. Assemblyman Otis, what training program should the state offer to those who have lost their jobs?
Well, the state and the county have a variety of training programs that are out there, but we're in a state of flux right now because what work is going to look like and where work is going to be is also up for grabs. And I think I agree with the comments of the governor. A lot of these companies who are taking the federal money are maybe have a secret agenda of lowering the number of workers that they employ, and that should not be allowed. We were already threatened with a situation where getting full employment in this country was challenged because of the way retail is going and what's happening with the factory work. And we have to make sure that we have a society that employs people. If you look and you see a lot of the economic disparity in this country, some of it is because we don't have jobs. And we have to make sure that we view our country as the goal is full employment for everyone that needs a job. Part of it is education. As I said, I'm on the education committee and also a big supporter of higher education, both SUNY and CUNY and our public and private institutions, our private colleges as well. They play an important role because they are recalibrating what they teach. The Board of Regents is also recalibrating the different kinds of things they have as requirements for K through 12.
Thank you. Ms. Cameron?
Yes, I agree that we won't know what jobs there are as we recover. We don't know what sectors will be lost the most. It certainly looks like retail, but it seems premature to train people until we know what jobs there will be for them to be taking. But it looks, I'm guessing we will have more gig and independent workers. And it's become very clear during this crisis that we have to do more to protect them. Because low wage earners without benefits, we see can be in deep trouble really quickly when the unexpected happens, like the COVID-19 crisis. And besides, we would all be healthier if workers were able to stay home when they were sick. My opponent is backed by the rideshare company Lyft, which opposes legislation that would help gig workers. They have a corporate PAC disguised as something called New Yorkers for Independent Work. So if you see ads from my opponent that say something about independent work and independent workers, that is really a front for the rideshare company Lyft. I have no corporate ties, and I have vowed not to take corporate PAC money, and I will stand up for the state's most vulnerable workers.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Assemblyman Otis, what is your position on legalizing marijuana?
My position is that we have to go slow. I have very serious concerns. It is certainly something that many of our bordering states have already done it. So that's a dynamic that we have to be aware of, but there are a lot of health implications related to it. So it's still getting looked at. But in this case, you have two very valid competing interests. One are the health concerns, and I share those concerns. But the other is the criminal justice equity issues that permeate our criminal justice system, the unequal treatment of minorities in the criminal justice system as it relates to drug crimes. And one of the things that we did in terms of the decriminalization of marijuana last year, we didn't legalize it, but we did shorten the sentence of some people who are basically in jail for things that aren't crimes in many other states right now. So it's going to have to work its way through the process. The inequality in the criminal justice system is unacceptable, and I think that eventually it is going to pass, but we better make sure that we do it right, that we learn from what other states have done and how they've done it, because other states have made mistakes, and a very difficult issue. So I'm monitoring the proposals. I'm monitoring what is going on in our neighboring states. But we have a real contradiction, and one of the contradictions is the inequality of it being legal in a bordering state and not being legal here. How do we criminalize that?
Thank you. Ms. Cameron?
So when this was taken up by the legislature, actually was being debated in the budget last year, somebody said, what is the Ride City Democratic Committee's position on marijuana legalization? And I said, gee, we don't have one, but this is such a contentious issue. Let me bring the community together. And I invited people from all sides of the question to my house. Anti-drug activists, pro-legalization activists, people coming from a social and racial justice point of view, people coming from a mental health, effect of marijuana point of view. One woman who had worked for Altria and wanted us to know about the stealth marketing that they do to minors through social influencers. And she said, yeah, this happens with cigarettes and they're going to do it with marijuana. And all these people with entirely different points of view came, and I didn't put an end time to this meeting. I figured we could talk and talk and talk. It was so interesting. We talked for 4 hours, and all these people who had started off quite opposite actually came to agree. This social justice part is essential. The decriminalization has helped, but we need to go further. Legalization is inevitable, but we must go slowly to minimize the deleterious effects.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Candidates, the questioning period is now over, and closing statements will begin. We'll begin with Ms. Cameron.
Okay, thank you. So right now we need a lot more than water grants. As we discussed, our district's first order of business is recovering from the COVID-19 crisis, and this will take fierce advocacy to make sure financial relief continues until local businesses, schools, and community organizations are back on their feet. My opponent hasn't even managed to get the tens of millions of dollars the New Rochelle and Portchester school districts are already owed by the state. I won't take no for an answer. Next, we must address inequities in the criminal justice system by enacting the suggestions of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. Furthermore, I do think federal prosecutors have to step in because, local prosecutors have to get along with the police, and legislators get support from PBAs, and it makes it very hard. So I do think the federal government has a role here. As we discussed, in case a second wave of COVID-19 keeps children home this fall, the state has to do things to help. And my opponent's educational focus has been on getting a sweetheart deal on public land for a private school that happens to be his alma mater, to which he has close personal ties. And I know the vital importance of public education, and I'll be a passionate advocate for our children. And there are so many topics that matter to me, including clean, green energy, gun safety, and maternal mortality, which I didn't even get to talk about. But it's a disgrace that so many moms die in childbirth who don't have to. But my 2 minutes is almost up. So please visit my website. Oops, I've got to stop. Please vote for me, June 23rd.
Assemblyman Otis, your closing remarks.
Oh, yes, thank you. I focus my campaign on my record of delivering results, and actually one of the biggest results I delivered was schools. I am the leader of the effort in the legislature to get more money for districts like Portchester, like Ossining, and most of the districts that I represent by getting low percentage foundation aid districts more money than they would be getting otherwise. In 2017, the Portchester School District had the highest percentage increase in school aid in the whole state because of a strategy that I have used working with the school district. Mamaroneck has also benefited, other districts have benefited in Westchester around the state. So my opponent really says things that defy any kind of sense of reality. And that's been, unfortunately, in some of the other things that she's put out in the campaign and some of the things she said here today. I'm going to talk about my record. My record is effectiveness in a way that people respond to it. People know, all the local officials that have endorsed me. In fact, I've been endorsed by 38 current and former local officials, women local officials in this county and in this district. They're really all from the Sound Shore. I've been endorsed by every group that has issued an endorsement so far, every organized group, including the League of Conservation Voters, Planned Parenthood Action, Westchester Coalition for Legal Abortion, AFL-CIO, Hispanic Democrats of Westchester, the Hudson Valley Stonewall Dems, unions, communications workers, CSEA, NICET, many other new unions and other organizations too numerous to name. But I'm going to finish with this. Governor Cuomo, on May 19th, in one of his great press conferences, said, what do we need in government right now? And he said this, government has to be smarter than it was. It matters now what happens. You have to know what you are doing, not just look like you know what you're doing, but know what you're doing, not just sound like you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You have to be smart. You're not going to tweet your way through this. You have to be smart. You need to be competent what you do. There's something called government, and either you know how to do it or you don't know how to do it. That's why I'm running for re-election, and I want to be a privilege to continue to serve these communities on the Sound Shore. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, the debate is now over. I would like to thank you for your time and thank our wonderful timekeeper, Rosalind Carvin. And I wish all a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Lee. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Good luck.